So, okay, Rajeev bhai, I welcome you to this dialogue today. And this is a continuation of our last dialogue in which we had talked about the future of work, and you had shared your views about individual, how as an individual we can, what are the things we can do. Today, you're welcome to start with your kind of recapturing the views about what an individual can respond to current situation in which, as you know, there is a tremendous amount of layoffs in Bay Area and economic upheaval. A lot of people are feeling the challenges, mental challenges, as well as
sorry, Dinesh bhai, I thought this was a live podcast, so I had given the link you had sent me to my two friends who are trying to join in. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. It's open to everyone.
Oh, so, wonderful.
Yeah.
Gagan and Amal. Perfect. Sorry.
So, yeah. So whoever, you're going to be noticing people joining us, and then we'll also keep it open for people to ask questions. And I'm looking at it more as a dialogue. You are the starting person, and then we would like so make it more of a dialogue. So Rajeev bhai, why don't you give us an opening dialogue on what an individual can do in this climate?
Yeah. So thank you very much, Dinesh bhai. It's a pleasure and a joy to be talking to you. So just to recap, what I was trying to say was that in this age where technology is only one of the disruptive forces, there are many other forces of disruption. For example, demographics, geopolitical shifts, and above all, climate change and environment. So in this kind of an ecosystem, which is, to use the cliche VUCA, there is also a lot of pushback by all stakeholders, and there is interconnectedness. So in this kind of a new normal, the nature of work, the nature of the workforce, and the nature of the workplace, all three are getting interconnected. But what is crucial is that to be able to survive and thrive in this new normal, there is deep need for people to get connected to their purpose and to their inner space. Now, it may almost sound sort of strange that I should be, when everybody is focusing on technology, I should be saying that, yes, technology, of course, will be there. It's like electricity. But the human being, human values, inner space, purpose, compassion, all these will become imperatives. For business organizations, they will become business imperatives. For people who are leaders, they'll become imperatives. So I had focused on the huge need for people to be connected to their inner space, for people to be connected to their purpose, to be able to navigate, to survive and thrive in the new normal. That roughly was what we talked about last time. Yeah.
No, absolutely, Rajeev bhai. And I think what we can do today is to take it deeper. And let's focus on one area. Let's say the corporate leadership. So what can the corporate leaders can do in this situation? What kind of actions you expect a corporate leader to take?
Okay. First and foremost is to have clarity about what the purpose of the organization is. And here, the suggestion that I'm making, and it's not a very original suggestion, is that the purpose of the firm was always defined as maximizing shareholder value. Can that paradigm be reimagined and redefined to say that the purpose of the organization really is to solve social problems profitably. And this change in the purpose leads to phenomenal changes in the way the organization works, in the way decisions are taken, and in the way that leadership behaves. So I would start by saying that the role of the leader is in defining the purpose and hopefully redefining the purpose from that which has been conventionally accepted for at least the last 40, 50 years as the purpose of the firm is to maximize shareholder value, and replace that by saying the purpose of the firm is to solve social problems, but do that profitably. I think that would be the starting point. Now, I can move forward if you like, or unless you want to spend some time on this very thing, which is what is the purpose of the organization and of the leader. And I was talking about this in the context of the business world.
Mm-hmm. No, please, let's go drill a little bit deeper into purpose.
Okay. So now, once that purpose is defined, I would like to suggest that there are 5 leadership behaviors or attitudes that I think would be vital for survival and prospering in the new normal. The first one is for the leader to be able to use the whole mind in any situation. By the whole mind, I mean the ability to combine the so-called left brain of logic, intellect, and rationality with the so-called right brain, which is empathy, intuition, connection, connecting the dots to see the bigger picture. So in any situation, to be able to seamlessly and effortlessly combine these two, the left and the right, to look at problems and solutions holistically. So that's the first thing. The second one is that leaders need to be multipliers. See, when the mantra is to do more with less, they have to be multipliers. Multipliers of what? And here I would suggest multipliers of energy, passion, engagement, of creating a sense of ownership, far from the old command and control model. Leader knows it all. I will tell you what to do. You do what I tell you to do. No, it is now replaced by the leader who listens, who respects the views of others, is clear about his purpose, but instead of telling people what to do, focuses on asking the right questions and then co-creating the answers with his people. Far from wanting to show, I am the best, I have all the answers, such leaders will get joy to see 1,000 flowers bloom. So this is the second behavior. The third one, I would call it knowing how to manage fear and leveraging failure. And this arises out of the fact that innovation is going to be key in the new normal. You cannot innovate unless you take risk and experiment. And almost by definition, if you take risk and experiment, there will be failure. Now, what is important is not that we failed, but what we did after we failed. Did we use the learnings from failure and leverage them to create the pathway to success? This is, of course, the sort of new model for innovation, that you try small, pilot, make quick and cheap mistakes, quick feedback loop, and try again. And this sort of cycle keeps repeating unless you've learned it. So failure, far from being a horrible thing and far from being a foe, becomes a friend and becomes almost essential, provided we learn from it. The fourth one, I call it mindfulness. Now, mindfulness, of course, has many dimensions, but here largely I'm talking about being able to be in the present so that we are aware of the possibilities that exist. And we can only be aware of the possibilities that exist if we are not prisoners of our own past. So mindfulness here is the ability to be aware of possibilities and then decide which, if any, of these possibilities we want to pursue. And that is possible if we are in the here and now and not prisoners of our past. And last but not least, the fifth one, and I'll quickly recap the 5, is to be able to generate trust. So you create an energy, if you like, where people trust the leader and the leader trusts his people. Both are important. Now, how do you create that? And my answer, which appears simple, but is not simplistic, is authenticity. You, of course, need to have some level of technical competence, but perhaps more than that, at the leadership level, you need to be authentic. And by authentic, I mean the leader says what he or she thinks and does what he or she says. So thinking, saying, and doing are aligned again and again and again. And this becomes the cornerstone of trust. So the 5 then: number 1, using the whole mind. Number 2, being a multiplier. Number 3, knowing how to manage fear and leverage failure. Number 4, being mindful. And number 5, above all, to be able to create trust. I believe that these 5 leadership behaviors or attitudes or trust would be, if you like, the panacea for many ills in the new normal.
Now, Rajeev bhai, you have so nicely summed up what many would probably categorize as conscious leadership, because all the traits you have described, and one of the key things which you imply, you have not said it, and that is the vulnerability. Because unless the macho leader of the past, unless they become a vulnerable human being who is going to have setbacks, who is going to have all the things you described, and he can still maintain authenticity, and he does not have to put on a facade of a great big guy, you know. So I'm totally with you. Rajeev Tiwari, in our one of the questions that has come up is he's asking, can you cite a case study, or can you cite an example where the profit motive was also met while pursuing this kind of leadership? Because there's a lot of skepticism about whether we will be able to create profit, because some people may consider this as a soft leadership, or what we call a servant leadership, or we call it compassionate leadership, but will it create profit?
Yeah. Okay, so, again, it's very difficult to establish directly or statistically cause and effect. But, let me cite the example of the Mahindra Group, with which I have been associated since 2004. And that group has done extremely well in terms of the growth of its sort of top line, bottom line, return on capital employed, reputation, work being done on energy, on all fronts. And they have actually followed this model. In fact, what I told you is really the core of what is known as Mahindra Rise. And, there's a Harvard Business School case study on that. So, I mean, it's all there in print. Now, as I said, it's always very difficult if somebody were to say, how can you prove that it was this pursuit, not only of profit, but of many other things that you talked about, that was responsible for the phenomenal performance of the Mahindra Group? And, statistically, I don't know enough statistics, nor have I done this work. It may be difficult to prove it, but I know, having been part of that system and having been privy to many decisions where short-term profit maximization was definitely given the go-by, and emphasis placed on the longer term and on the purpose, where profit was often put aside as short-term profit for following the purpose, for following the values. And lo and behold, in the longer term, actually it gave better results. Now, how does this gel with the quarter-wise performance? It's a listed company. We have as many people looking at our quarter-wise performance. So it came. But I know that the inner space of the leadership and an open stated commitment to these leadership traits or behaviors that I talked about was there on the table, is there. It's a Harvard Business School case study.
Well, Rajeev bhai, thanks for sharing that. If we are looking at an organization where this value has not yet entered, how can we persuade, or what kind of data, or what kind of arguments we can provide to the CEO of that organization that you ought to consider the Mahindra way, or
many others. I mean, I gave Mahindra only as an example. Yeah.
Right. Or the conscious leadership way, or the things we are talking here, that if you run the organization purposefully, and again, one of the topics very close to my heart is well-being of its employees. well-being of actually all the stakeholders. Now, currently, we know that organizations only are paying lip service. In our last conversation, we talked about that. How can we truly care for the well-being of our employees? And there are now I'm beginning to hear there are employees who are willing to take pay cuts, but they want to have more balanced life. They want to spend. They no longer, you can get employees to work 6 days a week and 10 hours a day, which has been kind of routine in many organizations. So how can we encourage leaders now to look at holistically and care for the well-being of all the stakeholders? Because the purpose of organization, if it's an organization is driven, like for example, I was looking at one organization and they say that we imagine a future of well-being of all or caring for all. But if you look at their actions, totally not aligned. What they are saying, what they're doing, totally not aligned. So what would you suggest?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the best way to get to anybody who doesn't believe something is to provide evidence. Can we provide evidence to show that those leaders and those organizations that followed this path actually gave the business results that were required? My understanding is that there is enough and more work being done on gathering evidence. And I know for sure that the Harvard Business School is doing a lot of work on purpose. I know, for example, that IMD Lausanne is doing a lot of work on purpose. And, these are all people, and these are academics who grew up in the older paradigm and who prayed at the altar of profit maximization, but they are now having a relook. For example, only yesterday I was listening to Rebecca Henderson, who has written Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire. And there also she makes out a solid economic and business case for not focusing on profit maximization, especially short-term profit maximization, if the firm is to actually survive and grow. Now, I don't think she has given too much of statistical and evidence-based, proof is a wrong word, but evidence to show that people who have embarked and used this paradigm have done well, but there are other people who have, right? So I think the only way you can really convince the people who are non-believers is to give them evidence, is to sort of bring onto their consciousness leaders and role models who have followed this path and have delivered results, good, great business results. For surely you have to get results. I mean, you can't do this and be a private sector or any kind of organization but doesn't deliver results. So the two have to go side by side. But the case is that you cannot deliver the results on a sustained basis unless you do all these things. Because we are living in an interconnected world, because the nature of the world is such that there is uncertainty and complexity. The nature of decision-making in organizations is now calling for iterative decision-making right through the value chain, having deep connect with your stakeholders, and therefore calling for distributed leadership, which in turn requires you to empower people, which in turn is not possible unless you have trust. So, a business case is being made out and evidence is being provided. And that's the big paradigm shift that I have seen. Maybe it's been there for a long time. I've seen it certainly in the last 10, 15 years, and I've seen an intensification of this kind of literature, at least from my being aware of it in the last 5 years. And I think the biggest push that will come is going to be climate change. And all the things that are going to happen because of climate change, we will be forced to rethink the relationship of organizations with the environment around us and with all stakeholders. And even if you want to pray at the altar of shareholder maximization, you will not be able to do that unless you look at stakeholder interests. So that roughly is the case. Sorry, I can't hear you, Dinesh Bhai.
Okay, so there was a request for the link for the Mahindra case study, HBR. I have put that in the chat. So now I think there are about 10 minutes remaining for our dialogue. So I would make it open to any of the participants if they would like to ask any questions, the role of leadership. And today we drill down on more on the purpose of the organization. But anything you may like to ask and you may want to, please go ahead.
I can't hear you, Dinesh bhai.
Yeah. So, Rajeev bhai,
Sorry, I was busy killing a mosquito.
I would ask a question, and
Yes.
my question is that as leaders of the organization, what do we do when we see the political? What is the role of corporate leaders in the national politics or in the international politics? Do they maintain neutrality, or do they maintain the corporate interest? Because sometimes you may find that the corporate interest may be at odds with the overall well-being of the society. And that's a very difficult and a challenging question, which a lot of corporate leaders face. What are your views on that?
Yeah, so I think it's a very complex question. Let me answer the second part, where the objective of the corporation is at loggerheads with the good of society. I think there the corporation will have to sort of align itself and change whatever, and make whatever changes are required to align with the good of society. Because I don't think any corporation can now, in this interconnected world, with the amount of information that is available, hope to be able to do good business by being at loggerheads with the social good. So I think those days are gone. Definitely, I'm pretty sure about that. On the question of should business leaders have sort of political views, or should they remain neutral, or should they enter into the political debate? See, my view is that, business leaders are also citizens of countries. And I think they have a role as citizens to have a view. Now, how strongly they express their views, that's something that they will always have to consider, right? But finally, it boils down to a moral choice. And I think there's no getting away from it. I don't think any leader can hope. Dinesh bhai, I can't hear you.
No, I'm listening. I'm listening.
Okay. So I think that business leaders ultimately have to make moral and philosophical choices. I think all business decisions ultimately are actually philosophical and moral choices. And there's no getting away from it. Having said that, I think the reality is a little bit more complex. So there are always degrees to which a leader can express his personal views, if it means that it's going to completely damage and ruin his organization. So those sort of shades of gray will have to be factored in. But I do believe that business leaders are also citizens of nations and of the world, and they have to step forward and they have to exercise their sort of moral decisions and be prepared to be counted for it. That's my view, but I'm no longer, and I never was a big enough business leader to to sort of get into that quandary. But business leaders are citizens after all, citizens of nations and of the world, and they must have a view.
No, thank you so much. And I kind of feel the same way about as a citizen, I must participate, but as a corporate leader, I must represent the voice of the entire organization. And that becomes very complex, like you mentioned. So there is one question from our audience. Let me read it to you. And this is from Amar Raj Singh. The problem is that ownership is passing on to PE funds, and they are interested only in valuations and multipliers. And what they say, the street wants this quarter-to-quarter approach to profit generation works so against all we are discussing. So, what can I do? This is what the marketplace is saying. I mean, we hear that again and again. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, so I think what Amar, my dear friend Amar, is saying is right, but I see a shift taking place there also. And there are many VC and PE funds who are actually at least making a sort of show of it. I don't know how sincerely they mean it. They probably do. Who are now shifting their commitment from short-term profit maximization to a longer-term view, which does embrace the interests of other stakeholders and of the planet itself. I think climate change is really pushing a lot of business leaders to think a little bit longer term, to think and realize that in an interconnected world, they cannot just have a one-way traffic where the firm is using the resources of Mother Earth and exploiting people, exploiting nations. That will not happen because there is a pushback that is taking place. Nature is pushing back. Stakeholders are pushing back. There is a lot of information that is available. So there is this whole movement that is taking place where there is a pushback and where the interconnectedness is becoming so high that you can no longer afford to take a view that assumes that the firm has available to it unlimited resources, whether they be of land or water or even air, and certainly not of labor, and where they can assume that they can do what they want and the communities will do nothing, or they can do what they want and control the government. I don't think that is going to happen. This is a fundamental shift. And, so when I defined the new normal, I said it's VUCA. Some people are now using the word Bani. That's okay. There is pushback, the pushback by stakeholders, and there is interconnectedness. If you take these three things together, you will see why it is so important for capitalists to become conscious, conscious capitalism, or you will call it, or whatever you want to call it. There is a shift taking place. The needs of capital are also changing. This is what I think now, and this is certainly, I know, the view that Rebecca Henderson has expressed in this book. And hopefully, more and more evidence will start coming and people will be forced. I don't think people do anything out of a feeling of philanthropy. I mean, capital will want its returns and the PE firms will want their returns, but they ain't going to get their returns if they behave in the old way, because the world has changed, because the environment has changed, because there is now a shortage of things that earlier we could take for granted. Now, labor is not going to be supine and lie down and say, tread all over me. Countries are not going to sit back and say, colonize me and, drain me. It's not going to happen. So those fundamental forces have changed, the reality has changed, and therefore the needs of capital have to also change, is how I see it. Now, this could be wishful thinking, being poetic, I don't know, but I see that happening.
So Rajeev bhai, thank you so much. We are approaching the end of our dialogue today. You have summarized the 5 qualities of the leaders, the conscious leaders, which we are needed now today. And you have also described the 3 factors, which are very, very important. One last question I have for you is, some leaders believe that they will do all the good work, all the social work outside of the organization, but inside the organization, they feel that they cannot, that the inside is very competitive, inside is still the same old, same old. What is your message for them? And we'll conclude
my message for them is, that your views are wrong.
Okay.
That you cannot lead this sort of, schizophrenic life. You have to be one, whether you're inside the corporation or you're outside at home. This schizophrenic existence may have worked in the past in an interconnected world with pushback by stakeholders and with the kind of, VUCA conditions. Schizophrenia doesn't work.
Thank you so much. And you pretty much started with that initial statement that we need to bring the left brain and the right brain together. And I also add to that, we need to the masculine and the feminine also to bring together. So that's where we become whole. So, and I think we see a lot of balancing taking place in the workplace as well. More and more masculine and feminine energy I'm not saying men or women, I'm only saying masculine and feminine energy, which is coming in balance. So, Rajeev bhai, any parting thought in the last minute?
I have hope that we may still be able to save planet Mother Earth and mankind. I hope so. But we'll have to work really hard and do much more than what we have done till now.
One suggestion I just see from Amar Singh ji is that he's saying make profit the last, not change the order of presentations. Make profit as the last slide. Thank you. Thank you, Amar Singh ji, and all the participants who participated in this and gave us your ideas. And thank you, Rajeev bhai. Have a good night and look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.